Hi, I'm Zainabus. I'm one of the 5 curators for Sharjah Biennial 16. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project that was commissioned in the Old Al Dhaid Clinic. This project is commissioned from Pastizal Zamudio, the artist, as well as from Andrea Torreblanca, the curator. So the way that this project started out was actually as a text that was commissioned for the Yale's publication projects specifically from the compilation called Monitor. Andrea at the time was the director of curatorial programs at Insight. Insight is an institution that works between Mexico and the US. And specifically, Andrea had been working and researching about this social housing project at the border town called Mexicali. This border town had the housing project that she worked with called Sitio, is one that was actually built in the 1970s and in which actually Pastizal grew up, the artist. We're seeing right here, what we're looking at right now is actually a commission from Pastizal with some of the ideas, a slideshow that is actually referring to a lot of the information that is in the text that Andrea wrote for the booklet. So the project is Sitio, just to go back to the text a little bit and give you a context for the Sitio, the housing project. It was designed by the architect Christopher Alexander, who was prodigy of cybernetics, one of the founders for Center for Environmental Sustainability at Berkeley in the 1970s. He started the project in 1967, and Mexicali project, he actually had an idea to work on a sustainable housing project in the border town of Mexicali. He did end up getting the housing project built, and it was by the workers who were going to live there, built the whole housing. People who do live there right now in this day and age remember their parents and their grandparents actually building the housing in which they still live. When Andrea met Pastizal had developed their practice that very much incorporated ideas of site specificity, and for a long while now, they had been taking in the philosophies of Alexander. Pastizal's practice had been involved with different ideas that had to do with cosmology, wandering, getting lost in the spirit of objects found and created on the way. Pastizal's experience as an on and off farm worker had also seeped into their practice and took on the shape of building installations that were wholesome and that reflected on the space's occupants and visitors. As I said before I invited Andrea to write her text for the publications, Andrea had already invited Pastizal to produce a new piece, a site-specific installation at Sitio. When Andrea's text was finished and I asked her whether she'd be interested in bringing this project, carrying over Pastizal's work to Sharjah, I had already started working in Al Dhaid as my main site for the biennial exhibitions. So it was an amazing coincidence reading the text and finding out that Al Sitio complex had been turned into a health center. Naturally, the place where we decided to show Andrea and Pastizal's combined works was at the entrance of the old clinic in Al Dhaid. Pastizal spent a sizable amount of time here. When they first came and looked at the place, the exhibition spaces had not been as renovated as we are seeing them now. There were signs left over from the health clinic that was here before. When doing the renovations, one of the few signs that we kept was the large sign right above Pastizal and Andrea's room, the one that says the Old Al Dhaid Clinic. While they were here on site, Pastizal had a lot of time to reflect on and think through Alexander's ideas and how his philosophies could be incorporated into the space in Al Dhaid. So what you see around this room, that is the installation from Pastizal, are very much those incorporations. For example, the pattern of the daffodils, which you see in many of the elements in the room, including on the sliding door, are extracted from a daffodil patterned cloth that Pastizal had found in Sitio back in the day. This idea of extracting patterns from nature that is then recycled into architecture is exactly the philosophy behind pattern language, which I had mentioned before. Another element is pastizal, used and referred to from Alexander's ideas, was the use of the machetes, for example, which are supposed to be protective elements in line with Alexander's philosophy. The entrance of a building or a house, again in his philosophy, is supposed to be the space that welcomes the residents, into the building with mindfulness, accentuating the human's presence in the space. So, in keeping with these ideas, Pastizal used the machetes as well as the benches that allow for an entrance that would welcome the visitors into a meditative space, but also act as a hosting place for the guides that typically occupy this area as part of the new function of these buildings that we're seeing in Al Dhaid, which is that they are exhibition spaces as part of Sharjah Art Foundation.